This is a big milestone for us, as we're part of a platform launch for the first time ever. We're all gamers ourselves and know how special this moment is, and would therefore be looking forward to the Nintendo Switch 2's release no matter what. But the fact that Cyberpunk 2077 Ultimate Edition is there as a day one title makes the occasion even more thrilling. We genuinely couldn't be happier and more proud. So says CD Projekt Red's Technology Vice President Charles Tremblay. He was also the lead engine programmer on both The Witcher 3 and Cyberpunk 2077, and in a new interview via NintendoLife.com, Charles lays out some interesting new information about Cyberpunk 2077's journey to arrive on the Nintendo Switch 2, working with Nintendo, and the evolution of the Switch 2's design throughout the development process and the customized NVIDIA processor and GPU architecture. Hello again, I am Blunty, and unfortunately, it does seem this interview was done over email or some other text-based method because all of the answers are very obviously cleaned up and pre-approved by some very boring PR and marketing people somewhere along the way. So that's a shame, because man, is this stuff ever not how an actual person talks, or indeed how a gamer talks about this stuff. Nonetheless, underneath the corpo-sanitized language, which I can't decide if it's ironic that this is corpo-sanitized crap, or it's just depressing, considering of course the thematics and spirit of Cyberpunk 2077 itself. But there is some fun new information here, so we are going to go through it. And props to Nintendo Life, they start out with the hard framing and the elephant in the room, asking about the notoriously troubled launch the game originally had, and the context of expectations that has built for the Switch 2's port being an important launch title, and how, well, frankly, the subtext is they really can't F this up. Because they worked so hard to rebuild player and customer trust after that disastrous launch, they can't let it happen again. Ever, and absolutely not being a launch title for the Switch 2. We're very confident, says Charles. We learned a lot from the launch of Cyberpunk 2077 and have spent a long time creating an experience that is now beloved by many. And he's right, of course, the game is awesome now, and I've personally considered it properly fixed and absolutely a must-play since Update 1.6. That's when all the major issues were ironed out, and the patches we've had since then, and the 2.0 and beyond patches, and the Phantom Liberty DLC have only further polished it. Since then, Charles continues, we've successfully released our acclaimed spy thriller expansion Phantom Liberty, which is included alongside the base game in Cyberpunk 2077 Ultimate Edition on Nintendo Switch 2. Thanks to the power of the new console, we truly believe the Nintendo Switch 2 players will enjoy the full Cyberpunk 2077 experience. Oh god. Do you see now what I mean about how clear it is that these responses were passed through marketing and PR? Like a normal person would just say Switch 2. You say Nintendo Switch 2 at the start, and then you just call it the Switch 2. But every time it comes up, it's referred to as Nintendo Switch 2 and Cyberpunk 2077 Ultimate Edition on Nintendo Switch 2. Just the branding is so important to the PR and marketing teams. It's just stop. Just let him talk like a normal person talks, please. It's just so gross. Thanks to the power of the Nintendo Switch 2 trademark. Nobody talks like that. Stop. We have a dedicated team of developers working hard to bring Cyberpunk 2077 Ultimate Edition to Nintendo Switch 2. All development is being done in-house, with support from Yigsoft when it comes to incorporating the Nintendo Switch 2 specific features, and support from Nintendo when it comes to overcoming all the fun challenges that come with creating for new hardware. God, it's awkward to read, and it's even more awkward to read out loud. Jesus. Yigsoft, of course, is a name familiar to many fans of both The Witcher 3 and Cyberpunk, especially PC players, because their work was mostly concentrated around modding tools, and then they were brought on board officially to collaborating with CDPR. Again, that was mostly around modding support, but also now it's clear using that clever modders toolset and thinking to help overcome certain challenges that hardware like the Switch 2 would pose for this big, fat game. And that's pretty encouraging, because it's the people behind Yigsoft who are responsible for Red Tools, one of the most powerful and frankly essential modding toolsets for Witcher 3 and Cyberpunk 2077, and they're damn clever and resourceful people. The mod scene probably wouldn't be anything like it is right now without these people. Every platform presents a unique set of challenges, but for the Nintendo Switch 2 version, we were insistent on making sure Cyberpunk 2077 retained its unique visual appeal in both TV and handheld mode. So again, there's that corporate speak. Docked. We regular people call it docked mode, not TV mode. Whatever. But yeah, the point he's making, it is, of course, very important. Even at the lower end of practical resolutions that we will see for the Switch 2, there's a really distinct visual presentation, a personality to how Cyberpunk 2077 looks that really has to be maintained if this game is going to feel right. There's a mood about it that is so important to the vibe. Mood, vibe. Real great words, plenty. But, all that's important to the immersion. But maintaining that mood, that vibe, that look while operating on the kind of hardware the Switch 2 represents is where we start talking about the custom chips and the NVIDIA tech. We used a lot of the tech offered by Nintendo Switch 2's custom NVIDIA processor, including DLSS and VRR, to achieve this, and are very happy with the result. We think Cyberpunk 2077 looks awesome on the Nintendo Switch 2, and figuring out how to best incorporate the console's unique features was also a fun, creative challenge. And again, I know I'll keep going on about this. I'm so frustrated by the corporate speak of it all, though. But, while Nintendo really avoids talking about low-level aspects of their hardware these days, I mean, once upon a time, they were super happy to talk about things like Mode 7 and whatnot back in the SNES days. But these days, not so much. But of course, we all knew already that the chipset in the Switch 2 was a customized variation of the NVIDIA T239. We knew this because of various and frequent leaks. And that T239 is, of course, a descendant of the Switch 1's original Tegra X1 system on a chip. The first rumors about the Switch successor using the T239 go as far back as mid to late 2021, for crying out loud. And a little over a week ago, we saw someone get their hands on an inoperable main board and chips somehow through the Chinese black market, and they did a detailed breakdown, which of course confirmed this once and for all already. And a shot of the chip die itself confirmed the 8 ARM Cortex-A78C CPU cores and NVIDIA's Ampere architecture with 1,536 CUDA cores. This Ampere GPU architecture was most commonly seen in NVIDIA's RTX 30 series cards, and features their second-generation ray tracing cores with third-generation tensor cores. For the non-tech literate people, the tensor cores I'm talking about there, among other clever things, they help handle machine learning and deep learning and similar AI-style tasks. So, important for things like DLSS upscaling and frame generation. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure this is the first time we've seen any official, or at least official adjacent capacity, talk about the custom nature of this NVIDIA chip. Chris was then asked about what makes this Switch 2 different to develop for than the original Switch. One of the biggest differences, he said, was in developing for a platform that was still evolving. Working on hardware that was actively being iterated on came with its own set of challenges, but thankfully Nintendo was very supportive and responsible throughout the process. Whenever we hit a snag, they were quick to engage and help us past it. And that ties into something I've dug into a couple of times in recent videos, the infamous story of how it was Capcom's feedback and intervention to Nintendo that helped save the OG Switch from starving to death, from being throttled on a completely insufficient amount of RAM that their earlier prototypes had. They showed it off to Capcom, and Capcom were like, no, you need more RAM, otherwise our games won't run properly on the damn thing. And of course, as I've said before, it turns out that was a pretty important change to squirt in more RAM there, because without that, we wouldn't have had Monster Hunter Rise, the best-selling third-party published game on the entire platform across its entire life. So it's no surprise to learn that CDPR had a similarly supportive back and forth with Nintendo while developing this port alongside the still evolving hardware of the Switch 2. It might be some time before, or if we ever hear any stories like the Capcom one, but it's still good to hear that this level of deep cooperation with third-party devs is being maintained. Talk then moved on to the mouse controls, something again I've also dug into several times already across recent videos. Mouse controls work very similarly to the PC version. You can use the optical sensor to aim a weapon and select your dialogue options or whatever else you would do when using a mouse traditionally. Gyro is incorporated for players looking for that increased precision while still using the sticks on the Joy-Con 2 controllers or Nintendo Switch 2 Pro controller. Hello, corporate speak. You could just say Pro controller. In fact, he probably did just say Pro controller, let's face it. And finally, touch controls in handheld mode are to make menu navigation easier. Pinching and tapping and swiping your way through menus makes you feel like a real netrunner. And I think that's the first mention of the touch controls with this game that we've had, right? It's not something I'll likely use myself. I always find it a bit awkward for simultaneous use with traditional controls on handheld devices the size of the Switch 2. I almost never use the touchscreen, for instance, on my ROG Ally. But yeah, still good that it is there as an option for those who do like it. And of course, just as a way to show off the full feature set of the Switch 2. Which is of course kind of important for a flagship launch title game. And finally, Nintendo Life reinforced the enthusiasm that gamers have been expressing about the fact that the Switch 2's port of Cyberpunk comes complete on a physical game card. No extra downloads, no keycard stuff, and it even has all of the Phantom Liberty DLC on the card as well. Before we made games ourselves, and were only localizing and distributed them for other developers, which of course is how CDPR started, we looked to give our physical versions lots of love and attention, including extra goodies for players like physical maps and so on. This legacy continued into our own games, like the original Witcher and eventually Cyberpunk 2077, as we gave the physical versions of this the same level of attention, and Nintendo Switch 2 players should expect some extra goodies in the box too. So that's new information. Extra goodies in the physical edition. But don't get too excited. Typically this kind of thing, outside of dedicated collector's editions of course, simply meant, maybe you get a fold-out map. Maybe some character bios in a little booklet. Perhaps a trading card style thing or something. So, don't expect much, but it's nice to know there's still something extra for the physical collectors in there. Even if it's not much, going above and beyond should still be appreciated. It was a simple decision when it came to including the entirety of Cyberpunk 2077 Ultimate Edition on the game card. We wanted players purchasing physically to have the best possible experience and be able to play on the go straight away. Now, I skipped over a couple of nothing burger questions or stuff the PR team wouldn't let them answer for all the usual reasons, like when they asked about the Witcher 4 Switch 2 version and whether that's going to be a thing, which, of course they can't talk about that. It's so early in development, of course they can't talk about that. Dumb question to even ask. But the full interview is linked in the down below for you if you are curious about those nothing burger questions. Pretty dry reading overall, what with the corporate approved editing that surely happened to the real answers. I would love to see the real answers. If only so I could read them in natural language in the way people actually talk to one another. But yeah, like I said, there was some new and interesting little tidbits in there, a few more solid confirmations of stuff we knew or knew through unofficial sources, and some reinforcements of stuff we knew already with some additional details. And I think that was all still worth sharing, even if we had to filter it through corpo speak. Thanks for watching. I am Blunty. I will catch you next time. Thank you as always to the Patreons.
What is with you, fucker? You